Unicorn Overlord is a game that wasn't even on my radar. Yet, here I am. Hello everyone, I am Hero Mystic and welcome to the channel. My very long-time viewers and friends would know I'm a very big fan of strategy RPGs. The most prolific of these is Fire Emblem, and for a long time I regarded this as my favorite franchise. This is context to tell you I learned of Unicorn Overlord when my YouTube feed started getting flooded with Fire Emblem YouTubers praising this game. I'm always down to try a strategy RPG, so I decided to give it a shot. So, as a casual game, it's fantastic. But how is it as a speedrun? Unicorn Overlord is the first of my video series where I try out a game to speedrun and evaluate it based on my own personal criteria. I do hold a belief of different strokes for different folks, so the idea behind this is to just present what the speedrun is like and not necessarily judge if it's good or bad. There's a crazy amount of variation in speedruns that people can enjoy, so I want to make it as clear as possible that my preferences are mine alone. Since this is the first video of this format, I will be spending extra time explaining how my criteria works as we go along. That said, if you like what you hear on this video, I will leave a link in the description on where you can get more information about the community. Unicorn Overlord is in a unique spot because as of writing this, the game came out roughly 4 weeks ago. With this being a new IP, that's an extremely small amount of time to drum up interest in a speedrun community, let alone having an established route. Luckily, I managed to find a community on speedrun.com, and when I joined the Discord, it only had 3 people. Since then, it has grown nicely, and we have settled on 3 primary categories: 80%, true ending, and 100%. Within these categories are subcategories based on difficulty. It's hard to tell which one people will gravitate to, but from what I've seen thus far, the most prevalent are story difficulty, which is the easiest, and true Zenorian difficulty, which is the hardest. 80% seems to be uninteresting for most speedrunners, so the most worked on routes are true ending and 100%. For the purposes of this video, we'll be focused on what I worked on, which is true ending on true Zenorian. The most important aspect of a speedrun is in its gameplay. In fact, a speedrun lives and dies based on one's enjoyment of simply playing the game. This begs the question, how does speedrunning an RPG feel good? For me, it comes down to 3 things: navigating menus, which is what you're doing 90% of the time, execution, and spectacle. When it comes to navigating menus, or menuing for short, what's most important is response time. When you press a button, you want the response to be instant. The best possible example of this that I personally know is Persona 5. To this day, I still haven't noticed a game with better menuing than that. Not only is the response instant, but the game is able to keep up with your inputs even if the user interface hasn't caught up to you. Unicorn Overlord isn't at that level, but it's still pretty good. What mostly holds it back is how slow it can be to rush through battles. I tend to mash a lot through these because of the significant delay in between button presses because the game wants to hype up if you won the fight or not. Fortunately, there's nothing complicated about this stuff. It's literally just mashing the skip battle animations, and it's pretty easy to prepare yourself afterwards. So personally, I never made an input mistake. Other than this, I would say the menuing is quite good. Pulling out the menu can take up a bit of time, and it can be somewhat awkward to select your units when trying to quickly organize your squad, but it's not frustrating at all. More importantly, inputs are near instant, so you can quickly make whatever changes you make to the tactics or equipment. Next up is execution, and what I mean by this is executing strategies. In a perfect world, whatever strategies that are developed would be 100% consistent, and all that would matter is the player. But very few games allow this, especially in the RPG genre. RNG will be a factor in a lot of speedruns, and it's especially so in Unicorn Overlord. What may seem like a perfect strategy in practice may go horribly wrong in an actual run because all of your attacks decided to miss, or the enemy tank perfectly guarded all attacks. The only way to eliminate this is to completely obliterate the enemy with great team building, but sometimes that won't be possible. In those cases, you have to know how to manipulate the RNG. And if that fails, you need to have a backup plan. While I personally enjoy this aspect, I can see this being very frustrating to new runners, especially if they aren't routers like me. To end on a positive note though, a good route will give you a way to manipulate the RNG in your favor so your run doesn't just die. Last up is Spectacle. This one is a bit of a doozy because I feel like this is greatly underestimated in speedruns. Spectacle is simply the satisfaction of seeing something be executed well. Great examples of this is Kingdom Hearts 2 and the Mega Man X series in general. A lot of runners enjoy speedrunning these games because of how cool and satisfying it is to pull off high-level tricks. RPGs do have some level of coolness to it, but it often involves already knowing the context behind the game. All of this to say, Unicorn Overlord falls into the camp of lacking spectacle due to its nature of a strategy RPG. The ones who would appreciate the strategies showcased by the runner or router would also be the ones who already know about the game itself. It's like having an inside joke. It's only funny because you have the context as to why it's funny. This isn't to say Unicorn Overlord was doomed from the very start because it's an RPG. The primary problem is actually that speedruns have to skip battles in order to save time. So all the time spent setting up teams and manipulating RNG technically only gets rewarded by the game telling you that you beat the enemy and then eventually the map. Things would be a lot different if we couldn't skip battles, but at the same time I'd say the game would be much more of a drag as a result. At this point, I will talk about my own experiences speedrunning the game and provide an abridged version of my run. But I cannot, as I've yet to complete one, as the route I personally created is now obsolete, thanks to a run that was made by the Japanese player Jikai. This run clocked in at 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 58 seconds. The route I made couldn't have reached this point, let alone double that. So I scrapped my route in favor of adapting to this one. It should be noted this run was done before patch 1.04, which generally buffs Swordmasters in Virginia. Jikai's run starts off like any other run, but very quickly turns to his own thing after the tutorial ends. Typically, this is the part of the run where we buff up Joseph just enough to do meaningful damage so we can save Scarlet. In my route, I also grab Melisandre as she is overleveled at this point of the game, and she nullifies DOS tanks entirely. Jikai, however, just rushes to recruit Yana, and successfully does so by bashing Clive's head against the barricades, and then jukes his way to the boss. With Yana teleporting in to break through the boss's defense, he goes down quite easily. After this, Selvi is recruited, which surprised me, but we'll get to her later. After this, we immediately decide to save Scarlet. This doesn't surprise me in the slightest though. I've done this myself, so I've always known you could always skip every map and just rush Scarlet's rescue. What actually surprised me was how it was done. Only one team is deployed, with Travis, Joseph, and Yana, and the other is the forced deployment of Fran, Keitra, and Miriam. Fran flies into the mini-boss's personal space, and Yana teleports in, bypassing 90% of the map. And I swear to God, I was so mad at myself because I never thought of this even though it was so simple. After beating the mini-boss, the two squads team up on Galerius. Many may be surprised that Galerius goes down against such heavily underleveled units, but the long and short of it is Galerius has no true strike, and his AoE ability only sets you up at 1 HP. So he has no way of killing a thief or swordmaster as long as they can avoid taking poison damage. Once Scarlet is saved, Jikai unlocks the Liberation quest, which would unlock the path to Pistorius to save for later. And then it does the side quest to unlock the Angel Shop. Mandarin is executed for the 15 shards, which is then exchanged for 2 knowledge dues and 1 lapis pendant for the extra passive point. After this, a mercenary hunter is hired, starting at level 5. Someone asks, why not just recruit Rolf? And the simple answer to that is, it's much faster to buy a unit than to do an entire map for one. After this, we go to Elheim, just to recruit Rosalinde, who knows. And then we take on Dragonhold. 3 teams are set up and off we go. The maps themselves are fairly straightforward, and we end up recruiting Berengaria, Prim, and Aramis. Out of all of them, the most important is Berengaria, as she just has enough going on to aid Jikai in cracking this game's difficulty wide open. As soon as Berengaria is recruited, the runner leaves Drakenhold and takes on a liberation quest to unlock backstories early. This map has level 25 enemies, and Jikai's party overall are hovering around level 9 and 10. Berengaria and Rosalind are the only units worth their salt here. That said, that's all that was needed. The map starts with Berengaria, the Hunter Mercenary, and Rosalind going into the forest on the map. For those that don't know, if you go into forest tiles, assists cannot target you. Berengaria then uses Provoke on 2 units, one of which is the Hunter manning the tower, and then a Farsight Crystal is used for the plus 50 accuracy. Berengaria survives the first onslaught carried out by 3 thieves and a Viking, thanks to her being built with a toughness belt which provides plus 10 HP and an endure effect, and her high guard rate. This gives her enough sustain for Rosalind to use Curing Call after each attack. A mounted squad plus Yana is then deployed to help Berengaria's squad reach battles quicker, exploiting the swap mechanic. The boss is then attacked, gravity is used to slow down the reinforcing cav unit so Berengaria has time to kill the boss, and then the map is completed. Now this is impressive, but this is also the first part of unlocking Bastorius early. After this, the first Bastorius map has to be completed in order to unlock the first city. And if this can be done, the run is basically trivialized until endgame. Obviously, he did just this. Berengaria is just that good of a tank, even when against a 5-man team of promoted units. It took 5 rounds of combat to defeat the boss, of course, but this absolutely wouldn't have been possible if Berengaria got rolled over. With that, Bastorius has been unlocked early, and this is where the real fun begins. Now, why is early Bastorius such a game changer? Well, first we get Unifi, a high damage unit who can do a fairly strong evasion build. Second, and more importantly, we get Ramona, who is legit the fastest flying unit at night, which will help trivialize map designs. But by far the most important of this is Mercenaries. On Bastorius, all Mercenaries are promoted units and start at level 20 or higher. These Mercenaries will be used to replace the mostly obsoleted units. This also means we do not have to grind for promotions, and we do not have to grind levels either. Grinding and Renown was the primary reason older runs were taking 5 or more hours to complete. So the idea of forcing your way into Bastorius to get over-leveled mercenaries has been eye-opening to the community, myself included. Anyway, for now, the runner settles on hiring a Great Knight, and bumps up the max unit size to 4. He then creates a unit that has Unifi as the evasion tank, the Great Knight Mercenary, Rosalind, and Fran. He then returns and obliterates Drakenhold with the overpowered squad. I promise you, it's not worth the play-by-play. Once Berengaria is saved, she is rewarded by getting a few defensive dues, and Rosalind gets buffed with knowledge dues. The runner goes back to Bastorius to hire a level 20 breaker, and then will progress through 2 Bastorian maps. On the Snowbound King map, there's a particularly strong boss that can wipe the floor with you even in a casual playthrough if you're not careful. He starts with damage immunity and then will attempt to obliterate you with magic, all while being guarded by 3 giant bears with shields. However, Unifi is built for evasion, so as long as one isn't unlucky, all that bravado doesn't matter. The Breaker and Rosalind breaks through the front line, and on the second turn, the squad destroys the boss. The boss does call for reinforcements once you get close to him, but Jikai resorts to throwing down barricades to force these units back and buy no time to kill the boss. Finishing the Snowbound King is an important milestone in the game, because this is the first time you get access to the best accessory in the game, Sniper Amber Lens. For those not in the know, Sniper Amber Lens gives True Strike and automatic critical hits per attack at the cost of 2 passive points, which is more than worth it. The hammer called Juggernaut is also bought, and this is purely for the Galerius fight. A werefox is then recruited for the insane mobility at night. Bastoria's main story is then completed through the use of the Were-Owl's flight and the Werefox's mobility through forest. Fran retires once a Griffin Master is recruited for the promoted abilities, and 5 Dream Blossoms are bought to force nighttime on any map that needs it. Elheim then gets obliterated, there's no real way to say otherwise. The combination of hasten call and forcing nighttime on maps is so absurd that enemies on the map might as well just be barricades. They have no way to force an interaction against a player that is going so fast. Alcina is swiftly defeated by the Overlord squad, and the port is then liberated to go to Albion, bypassing what would otherwise have been a required side quest with a very large map. This is the point where the game catches up to the player in terms of stats, but this is also the point where we have all the necessary tools to counter each boss on every map, and not make it close. In most cases, Albion has never really been an issue in any route thus far. But it's especially so in this route as Ramona just zooms across all the maps with exception to the last one. A Vanguard is hired, more on this later. The Holy March is intended to act as a pseudo-escort mission, where you bring the battering ram to the enemy gate and break it open. The thing is, this ram is basically not needed in the slightest. Once you reach the gate, you can fly over with a flying unit. There's no real incentive to bring the battering ram, even in a casual playthrough. So a hastened werefox will zoom to the gate with no real issues, then change leaders to a flyer, and then reach the boss for an easy win. Now, the actual issue is our main character, Elaine. The last time he was on the map was to recruit Yana, so the guy is level 4. Elaine is required to defeat the final boss, which we are quickly approaching. So Jakai's route has Elaine added onto the team that would defeat the boss on the Holy March. With Royal Order used, he goes from level 4 to level 23. After this, a shield shooter, Dune Knight, and Druid are hired. The Purifier is bought, and Elaine and Yana does a Dragon Ball Z eating arc so they can get married. Elaine and Yana are then promoted, the western side of Grand Corn is liberated, and Elaine with Brickyad reaches level 35 after this point, making him just viable enough for the final map. Shackles are then bought from the black market, and it's time to take on the final map. The final map involves a lot of unit swapping to deal with the 4 mini-bosses. There's a lot of micromanagement to negate enemy assist and bypassing traps. As for the Vanguard, his main contribution is utilizing arrow cover versus range attacks against Ramona. The shield shooter is recruited just to block enemy assist, and the Dune Knight is there to provide plus 20% attack against the final boss. Versus Galerius, a team of a Breaker, Griffin Knight, Rosalind, and Elaine is used. Rosalind does a start of battle stun to stop Galerius from putting up his damage negation. Elaine uses Cavalry Slayer, and the Breaker's Juggernaut lets him ignore all defense against cavalry targets, which means massive damage when backed with Amber Sniper's Lens and Gambler's Coin. Galerius goes down in 2 rounds of combat. This leaves the final battle. The team is arranged as Elaine, a level 10 Yana, an Evasion Take Sanatio, and the Breaker. About every buff known to man is used. Selvi uses her one and only contribution to the run, which is putting down a Farsight for the plus 50 accuracy. Elaine uses Valor's Order, and Baltro, the final boss, is defeated in a single round of combat. The timer ends when the game confirms the win, and the timer clocks in at 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 58 seconds. Seeing this run was a very eye-opening experience, and frankly, this is one of the biggest reasons why I love speedrunning RPGs. While RPGs aren't the most flashiest and spectacle-heavy of speedruns, the amount of planning and stress testing one has to do to make some of the fastest runs imaginable can sometimes feel infinite. Unicorn Overlord in particular is a fantastic speedrun because it's this to a T. By now, knowing it's possible to beat the game by utilizing mercenaries, the next step is to see how much further the game can be pushed. As a reminder, the game has only been out for a month at this point. It'll be pretty exciting to see how much further the category can go. That said, if you're at all interested in Unicorn Overlord speedrunning, a link to the Discord is in the description. As a person who has studied the game excessively, you're also free to leave a comment below and I'll answer any questions you have. Happy speedrunning, and thanks for watching.